for the sustainable ocean economy. My name is Diewertje, you can call me Didi, and I'm going to be a moderator for today. So I would like to give you a warm welcome, everyone. And now we're getting started. I actually would like to first share with you the house rules of today. Well, the first thing I'm going to ask you is to actually change your name, stating your name, underscore, and your institution. That will make it a bit easier to see whom are all participating. Then on a practical note, your video and voice will be muted, so we can fully see and hear the speakers. And for questions, of course, there will be opportunities, and to do so, there will be a Q&A box, which you can use. So we close the chat, but you can use the Q&A box. And after the speakers, there will also be plenty of time for interaction. And based on the question, we will direct them to the speakers, and we might ask you to give the floor, might give you the floor so you can actually ask the question yourself. So if you put in a question in the Q&A box, please also do the same, first stating your name, underscore, organization, and then the question that you have. And as mentioned, we are really actually looking forward to the question and the interaction, so please don't hesitate in adding them. Furthermore, I would like to let you know that this webinar will be recorded, and of course, we hope to that you have an interesting session today. Well, then I would say it starts to get time for some inspiration, because I can imagine that a lot of you are here today to be inspired and to learn more about the opportunities that are there in the blue economy. And to be honest, I'm very delighted to be here today, because the health of our oceans is a topic that, I feel very connected to. And one topic I would like to highlight is actually the plastic pollution of the ocean. Can you imagine that every day a truckload of plastic is actually entering into our oceans? It's a massive problem, which is still growing every day, both the production and the pollution. And that's very striking, of course. And at the same time, I would also like the message to be that there are opportunities to make a change. Myself, I'm part of NVU, and specifically the Zero Waste Living Lab in Indonesia. And there we are developing solutions for the market, so developing innovations that are based on reuse, and as such preventing plastic waste and providing an alternative for disposables. Well, what we have seen, and which I hope is inspirational for you, is that when we started, reuse and upstream solutions were actually quite new, and people were maybe not even really talking about it, or doing a lot with it, which maybe also wasn't so strange, because implementing a reuse solution actually requires quite some change of consumer behavior. Companies need to change their supply chain. Governments might need to change their rules and regulations. So that was quite challenging. But what we have seen as well, that at the moment that our solutions became successful and have shown positive results, the market is actually moving. And that's also why I believe that innovation can definitely be a change maker, and is also key actually for this systemic change. And I'm very happy that today we have speakers that all put a lot of effort in making positive impact, and that we also have speakers that are related to different parts of this ecosystem. So, of course, this webinar wouldn't be possible without AIS and Engine. So hereby I would first like to give the floor to Sarita Anggunkinanti from Engine. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much, Didi. And good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sarita. I am from Angel Investment Network Indonesia, Angin. It is my great pleasure to address at the opening of today's webinar on blue innovation opportunities in building solutions for the sustainable ocean economy. So first of all, I would like to express our warmest gratitude on behalf of Angel Investment Network Indonesia to the archipelagic and Island States Forum or AIS Forum for having us to co-hosting this webinar on this interesting topic about the blue economy sector. And then I also would like to thank you all for joining us today. It is an honor today that we have our honorable panelists and the AIS Forum representative. So I really thank you for the first one, Dr. Martin Black from the Blue Planet Environmental Solution that is based in Singapore. And then the second one, thank you for Mr. Kenneth Catafono from Traceable that is based in Fiji. And then Ms. Valencia Dea from Circulate Capital that is based in Singapore. And then Simon Smith from UNDP Accelerator Lab, South Africa. And our special moderator, Didi, who is the head of Zero Waste Living Lab program, who is based in Netherlands. And of course, Mr. Ahmad Arsyasani as the coordinator project of AIS Forum UNDP Indonesia. And I would like to briefly introduce Angel Investment Network Indonesia for you who might have not heard about us before. So Angel Investment Network Indonesia, or ANIN, is an investment network in Indonesia, and we frame our services under two divisions. The first one is ANIN Investment, which we operate as a bridge between entrepreneurs and investors in Indonesia. And then the second one is Angel Investment Network Indonesia ANIN Advisory, which we offer several key services from research, capacity building, consulting, to even organizers like this webinar today. So this year we were supporting several of the AIS Forums program. The first one was Innovation Challenge. It was a competition about resilient business. And then currently we are also supporting the AIS Blue Startup Hub on their first incubation program with 18 startups from 6 countries from early October until the end of November this year. And finally, we are holding this webinar as a side event to go to their ministerial meeting on 25 November, which will be attended by 47 countries. And as we all know, the Archipelagic and Island States Forum itself is a platform for startups, investors, and other stakeholders that focus on finding solutions to climate change and ocean problems. And we also know that this year is marked by another challenge, the COVID-19 pandemic that is now inducing an economic shock that is felt globally. And to respond to these challenges, we must not stop moving forward. We can continue to develop and grow in many ways, and one of them can be represented by joining this webinar. I'm looking forward to the opportunity beyond this challenging time. So ladies and gentlemen, with the immense experience and expertise assembled here today, I am confident this webinar will facilitate a very constructive exchange on the opportunity in building sustainable ocean economy. And I look forward to the fruitful discussions today. So on behalf of Angel Investment Network Indonesia, once again, I thank you all for making time in your busy schedule to join us today. Thank you, Didi.
Thanks a lot, Sarita, for this brief introduction. And like I already mentioned in the start, there's another very important organization here now, which is, of course, AIS Forum. And therefore, I would like to ask Ahmad Arsyasani for an introduction from their side. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Didi. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I hope you all can hear me. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to welcome you to the Blue Innovation webinar, Opportunities in Building Solution for the Sustainable Ocean Economy. I'm Ahmad Sani, the coordinator of the Archipelagic and Island States, or AIAs, Forum Secretariat here at UNDP. Before we start, first of all, I would like to thank the speakers and the moderator for joining us. We're very grateful to have you all today. I also want to thank ANIN as our partner in developing the AI's Blue Startup Hub and helping us in supporting entrepreneurs in the blue economy sector. So blue economy is a term that we hear a lot for the past years, but even more so this year. But what is exactly a blue economy? Now, I'm going to be a bit theoretical here. So according to UNDP, UNDP defines blue economy as an approach that takes into account the health of the oceans and seas as we strive to balance the 3 dimensions of sustainable development, which are economic, social, and environmental. This concept promotes economic growth, social inclusion, and improved livelihoods at the same time as ensuring the environmental sustainability of oceans and seas. Now, that sounds theoretical, but I think to use a more practical term, it is essentially the implementation of sustainable practices in the ocean economy. Now, the EAS Forum is a platform we're designed to facilitate collaboration between archipelagic and island states around the world. It was initiated by the government of Indonesia through the Coordinating Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Investment. We have 4 thematic areas of cooperation, and they are climate change mitigation and adaptation, marine plastic debris, good maritime governance, and blue economy. Now, other than the fact that this sector would roughly double within the next few years. So according to the UNDP Oceans Action Hub, the value of maritime industries and coastal resources would double from roughly 3 trillion to 6 trillion US dollar in the next few years. The maritime sector and also the marine ecosystem plays a very great important role for archipelagic and island states. So you can see that is why we are focusing our work here. And I just want to end my remark to say that we're grateful for the support that has been provided to us throughout the year, and we hope we can expand our network and partnership to other regions such as Pacific, Africa, Caribbean, and others. And finally, please see the following presentation about the AIS Forum and its activities. Thank you so much.
The Archipelagic and Island States Forum is a platform designed to facilitate 47 archipelagic and island nations to collaborate and cooperate in addressing common challenges in 4 thematic areas: climate change mitigation and adaptation, blue economy, marine plastic debris, and good maritime governance. In 2017, the idea to establish the multinational cooperation framework among the archipelagic and island states was first iterated during the UN Ocean Conference in New York. In November 2018, Indonesia hosted the first ministerial meeting with 27 archipelagic and island states. The Archipelagic and Island States Forum was established by Manado Joint Declaration. In the following year, the second ministerial meeting adopted the final outcome with 25 AIS participating countries. To achieve our vision, we focus on 4 objectives which we translate into our programs. Create an open, innovative, and engaging forum, provide a space to share and implement innovative and tangible programs, promote collaborative efforts among stakeholders, and create opportunity through the blue economy. Ideation, implementation, and evaluation are the core elements to our solution framework in addressing the problems. In 2020, AIS Forum launched programs to drive innovation, which are AIS Joint Research, a collaborative applied research program affiliated with academic institutions in AIS countries with various topics related to the 4 areas of collaboration. The Innovator Scholarship Program, a fully funded exchange program for talented individuals from AIS participating countries who can demonstrate exceptional leadership quality and creative mind, and AIS Innovation Challenge, to find innovative ideas and breakthroughs that can help societies and businesses to be more resilient and adaptive during crisis situations. AIS Forum also launched AIS Blue Startup Hub, a platform to connect marine-focused startup in 47 archipelagic and island states across the globe. AIS Blue Startup Hub Mentoring Program was launched with 18 participating startups from 6 countries. As an effort to realize the smart, innovative solutions, AIS Forum also engaged with public audiences through online events in a form of trainings, workshops, talk shows, and discussions with various topics and stakeholders across AIS participating countries. In light of COVID-19 pandemic, it is important for archipelagic and island states to have a resilient economy. Therefore, AIS Forum Secretariat introduces programs which focuses on blue economy. As a form of its commitment, AIS Forum developed Blue Economy Development Index, or BEDI. This index will be used as a tracking tool to determine the current use of coastal and marine resources. And it can be used as a tool to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. Blue Financing Framework, or BFF, which provides a guidance for governments, financial institutions, philanthropists, and donors to align their investments with the blue economy principles and allow them to select a project to be financed in the blue economy sectors. Smart and innovative solution programs, such as sharing knowledge sessions with experts and representatives from AIS participating countries. Plankton, which was a competition to raise awareness in reducing marine plastic debris. Impact pitching, which connects startups, small and medium-sized enterprises, potential investors, and growth enablers to gain partnership. And Ending Plastic Pollution Innovation Challenge, which was a collaboration with Marine Plastic Debris Project from UNDP Indonesia to address marine plastic pollution in Southeast Asia. Many solutions to challenges that affect AIS participating countries in 4 main thematic areas and SDG 14 goals are produced through collaboration programs. These programs will explore opportunities through innovation and experiment that benefits on a local, regional, and international scale through sharing knowledge and experiences between AIS participating countries.
Thank you so much for sharing this introduction, and I actually think it's amazing to see that we have this this collaboration across borders to tackle actually issues with such an important thing as our oceans. So thank you for sharing that, and also great to see all the initiatives that are already ongoing with innovations. So now I would like to open the floor to first of all one of our innovators to talk about the opportunities and the challenges of innovation in the blue economy, and to share a bit about his venture and the solution. So hereby I would like to invite Dr. Martin A. Blake of Blue Planet.
Oh, good morning, everybody. Are you going to put my slide deck up?
Yeah.
As you can probably tell from my clothing, I'm actually not in Asia at the moment. I'm in the UK, and it's still dark and very cold and wet, and it reminds me of why I left to come to Asia and work from Singapore. But as you'll see, I'm representing Blue Planet. I've been working in the field of sustainability, public health, environmental health, and looking after islands in particular for many years. And prior to COVID, our last assignment, we were in the archipelago of Miek in Myanmar, and we spent several trips down to the island of Phu Quoc in Vietnam, looking at how we could help those areas deal with waste, and in particular the scourge of thin film plastic. In doing so, we work pretty extensively with the World Wildlife Foundation, WWF. Okay, so we can move on. So single-use plastics are actually such a problem, and I think before we start looking at, because you can read for yourself the percentages here, and I'll talk more generically around it. Of course, their origins come from petrochemicals. So, you know, crude oil is extracted, they're refined, those materials are then polymerized into different forms of plastic, and they're incredibly durable. They don't break down easily. And as you can see here, plastics, 60 to 90% of all debris is plastic, and it's becoming on social media and in the news, and that many protagonists now are leading on this issue of what we call ocean-bound plastic. Similarly, in landfill, we deal a lot with landfill remediation, and when you go into landfills that have been there for years and begin to start extracting the material, the plastics are all still there and pretty much everything else has gone. So their ability to remain in the environment in a long-term way is a problem. And we also see significant issues around burning them. They either end up in sometimes in cement plants as RDF, or often being illegally or illicitly burned to strip back things like cables. So dealing with them is a significant issue and a main focus for what we do in Blue Planet. Okay. And change the slide. There we are. So back one. So for us, there's two parallel journeys that we would see. The first is, of course, solving the problem at source, which is to actually replace single-use plastics with something more sustainable, and there's plenty of opportunities out there for that to be done, whether it's done using natural products such as bamboo, organic fiber materials such as cornstarch, or indeed some of the more biodegradable plastic that is beginning to emerge with more advanced levels of biochemistry. That's not really what we do, but I'm delighted to see that occur. What we do is we actually look at discarded plastic, and we don't actually call it waste in Blue Planet, we call it discarded plastic, because we see that as still having in it all of the hydrocarbon material that was originally put in there. So when I see lots of plastic, it's like looking at fuel and energy. So our approach is, how can we convert that back into other products and upcycle it, or at worst recycle it into other materials. Okay, next one. So some of the problems are around that actually some of the plastics don't actually have any value, or let's say they're perceived as having no value, because I think that the fact that they contain significant quantities of hydrocarbon is lost. So one of the first things that we would do using our technologies, and for plastics, let's take thin film, for example, we use a process called low temperature depolymerization. And basically that heats plastic and turns it back into a liquid fuel. It goes back to being a carbon ring structure that can be used in the same way as diesel or paraffin or kerosene can, because it goes back to its origins. But before we can do that, we have to incentivize the collection and the market to actually ascribe it value. Once we've got a value ascribed to it, then it's less likely to be seen as what we call ocean bound. And most of the plastic we see discarded around the streets and on the beaches and washing up on the beaches is primarily thin film plastic, because most people don't consider it to have any intrinsic value. So we like to incentivize collection, create networks through which we've either got central and decentralized technologies, and then use our technologies to process and upcycle it as necessary. Of course, that requires a significant engagement with local networks and communities. And I can remember the last place we were at was engaging with the Sea Gypsies in one of the island or several of the islands off the Miek archipelago to try and see how we could take account of the social issues as well as the environmental ones with the plastics, and create some kind of triple bottom line approach to how we could engage with those people. So creating the infrastructure is actually something else that needs to be done. So it's complex and it requires a systemic approach. Next. So from our standpoint, upcycling is where we're turning products from a lower level of value into a higher level, and recycling is where we're taking something and putting it back into an equivalent or lower level of value. So an example of the upcycling that we would undertake would be to take non-contaminated plastics, PET, clear plastics, and then process them into high quality monofilament yarn, and that can be sold into the garment industry. Now at the moment that's particularly popular, and a lot of the big brands and a lot of the fashion brands are very keen to capture this, because then they can state that they're looking to retrieve plastic from oceans and other environments. So capturing ocean-bound plastic, turning it into monofilament yarn, and then putting that back into the garment industry is particularly useful. On the other hand, a lot of the molded plastic waste is contaminated and requires a lot of processing, and is best used for a recycling. And there an example is where we take that waste, separate it and segregate it into colors. Then it's basically melted, extruded and pelletized, and that then can go back into the plastics industry. So those are the sorts of two approaches we've got, one on the upcycling and one on recycling with regards to hard plastic. Now we need to look at soft plastics. Next slide. So here we use the process called low temperature depolymerization, and I'm just going to run through the top rather than read you the slide. So basically mixed plastic waste is collected and sorted, it's cleaned, it's decontaminated, it's shredded, and then it's effectively liquefied. That means heating it to around somewhere in excess of 390 to 410 degrees. The plastic then comes to a liquid phase, and it's a simple process then, or relatively simple, of distilling that and turning it back into fuel. And then the fuel can be used for energy. So you could use it in stationary applications such as generators, boilers, or you can use it for either marine industry in terms of fueling boats and ships, or perhaps vehicles. Next one. So the outputs of that process is predominantly fuel. You can see from the donut chart there, the majority is fuel. There's some synthetic gas which actually is put back into the process to run it. There's residual char and asphalt which goes into things like roads and road surfacing, and then there's moisture. So we can actually turn these products into, we can use the outputs at where there is, it sits with what we do in Blue Planet, which is a zero waste approach. Next one. So scaling up our approaches, we like to work with all of the organizations listed there, and I'm cognizant of time, so I'm not going to run through that in any great detail. But currently, we're working with very large organizations throughout Asia. We're based in Singapore. We've got significant operations in India. We're licensed and regulated in Vietnam, Thailand, and as I said, we were beginning to move into Myanmar. So that's where we're operating. And I think we should move on to the next slide because you guys can read that at your leisure. Is there a market? We believe so. And as you'll see from this slide, many of the big organizations, Unilever is one of the leaders, Interface, Procter & Gamble, they're all moving towards eliminating single-use plastics from either packaging or their product. And Dubai, who I'm actually working with quite significantly, have just set up new initiatives to deal with this issue as well. So the answer is there is indeed a growing market for upcycling and recycling. There's a market for the products that displace these plastics, and there's an increasing awareness and market for their collection and processing. Next. So for us, social inclusion is paramount, and we like to ensure that we're not going to create problems rather than solve them. So we like to work with communities, set up awareness. We particularly work with vulnerable women through other foundations in helping to set up a process of collecting and processing waste. We train people in how to operate it and then deploy the equipment to help their local economy in the appropriate ways. So social inclusion is a very significant key for us. We definitely don't drop equipment in and then walk away. So we are founded on the premise of net positive impact and triple bottom line, and social inclusion is a key part of that for us. Next one. And that's it. So at this stage, I'm not sure what you guys are going to do about questions, but I'm happy to take them now or later.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martin. Yeah, we will mainly have time for the Q&A after all the panelists have spoken. But I already wanted to highlight that something I find very intriguing in your story is how you explain the systemic approach, that it's actually quite a difficult or complex issue, which also requires, in a way, a complex solution. And it's great to see how you manage to get everyone together. There's one very quick question I would already like to highlight, and that's actually about the impact of plastics. Could you very shortly answer how plastic actually contributes negatively to climate change? It was a question from the audience.
Well, I suppose, first of all, that would be the same as saying, how does the fossil fuel industry contribute negatively to climate change? So plastics are primarily derived from the fossil fuel industry, which is energy intensive in the first place. And then once you've extracted that fossil fuel, it then is further processed, and it either ends up degrading naturally, or it's burnt, or ends up in landfill. So there are many ways in which it can contribute to climate change, depending in which form it is and how it's got into the environment. But generally speaking, it's not dissimilar to any of the other fossil fuels. We're taking historic, long buried oil reserves and bringing them to the surface and then using them in huge quantities. And I think if you were to do a calculation on the amount of plastics that end up in cement plants and power generators around the world, and then ascribe a carbon CO2 equivalent to that figure, it would be a pretty huge amount.
Thank you so much for explaining. Thanks a lot. As said, there will be more time for Q&A afterwards. But now I would like to go to our second startup and hear more about their solution and the opportunities and challenges that they face. And therefore, I would kindly like to invite Kenneth Catagono, the founder and managing director of Trace.
Thanks, Didi, and Bula Vinaka, everyone. Connecting here all the way from Fiji. Let me just share my presentation deck. Okay. Okay, so today I'll be talking about the work that we're doing in largely the Pacific Islands fisheries and how we are trying to reimagine the fisheries sector with technology, and largely focusing on supply chain transparency and getting greater value out of the resources in our waters. So Traceable Solutions, we're a digital traceability tech company. We're the only company of our kind in the Pacific Islands, and we're 3 years old. Founded by my wife and I. So my background is tech. I've been building digital solutions for over a decade around the Pacific. My wife has a fisheries and marine science background. And so, 3 years ago, we saw our work in fisheries, we saw opportunities in this sector, and not a lot of private sector innovation coming through because it could be a very difficult sector to get involved in and to get a startup going. We've also been fortunate to be pioneers in the use of blockchain technology in the Pacific. Some of our work has been shared internationally. We've done work in the longline tuna fishery sector particularly, and we were the first in implementing the technology here, and we've continued to build on that. So just to give you a brief idea of where we've kind of worked and where we kind of work now. So this is the Pacific Island, largely most of the countries in the Pacific Islands, and I formerly worked for the Foreign Fisheries Agency based in the Solomon Islands, which is a regional fisheries agency. And so our work has covered pretty much, and my professional career has covered pretty much most of the Pacific Island countries where we've built digital solutions. And we're now, focusing more on, on the industry side of things, as opposed to the government and intergovernment organizations. So blockchain has been part of our business, since the start. We've been involved in it since, as long as we've been a company, really. And I became a blockchain developer myself. Recently co-authored the FAO's first study on the use of blockchain technology in seafood value chains, which was released this year. And so what we've tried to do is take emerging technologies and see how we could apply it, within our local context, and to see if it could address some of the challenges that we face in terms of transparency and whatever else in the seafood sector here. So very simply, in terms of traceability, we spent a lot of time doing research and development. We track fish, from the point of capture. We've tracked, over 55,000 fish, in the last 12 months. And we're still very much a startup. It still, takes quite a lot of time to gain traction here in the Pacific, in particular. And so, our current clients export to those particular destinations. Aside from tracking every single fish through the entire supply chain, where possible, we collect a whole bunch of data that's utilized by the fishing companies and also by regulatory authorities where possible. Very simply, the solution is every single fish that's caught is individually tagged, and we're talking about the longline tuna fishery. So fish is hauled in one by one, so this allows it to be tagged. So we tag everything that's caught out at sea. Data is captured, a unique identity is given to that particular fish, and then we track that identity throughout the process. Very, very, very simple. We've crafted the technology and the application around the infrastructure challenges that are here in the Pacific, and also the limited use of technology in some sectors. And the goal is to eventually create a digital story about these products, which you can then relate to the consumer. So if you scan that QR code that's on the screen, you'd be able to see a very, very simple story of that particular loin, and you'd also be able to see the data being recorded on the blockchain. How that works, again, very simple, mobile app used on a fishing vessel to collect data. We spent a bit of time, training crews how to use this type of technology and customizing the design to their uses. All of that is, all the data is then integrated into a centralized platform. Everything's, cloud hosted. And then we can integrate that seamlessly into the Ethereum blockchain. That integration, having that data on the blockchain is really a cost to the companies that use our solution. And if they wanted to, they could utilize that. But again, they'd have to bear that cost. So in terms of challenges in the ocean economy, what we're seeing here is greater market access requirements, requiring greater traceability in the seafood sector. We're also seeing IUU being a problem in the Pacific Island countries. I think a study a couple of years ago looked at probably quantified it at around $500 million US annually, but then that adds up as the particular product goes through the supply chain. There's also, in some countries, there's decreasing catch, increasing effort. Climate change is expected to, impact the Pacific Islands fishery, with some of the stock expected to move more eastward and more to the central and eastern Pacific, which basically means that, some of the countries that have been good fishing grounds, may see decreased stock in their waters. We're also seeing, while fisheries has probably utilized a lot of technology in the Pacific. There's been a lot of effort in terms of digitization and all of that. We still see there being a lot of gaps in creating opportunities for startups like us to be able to offer solutions in that space. There's limited access to good data in real time, and this is again largely for some of the smaller fishing companies that operate in the Pacific. And again, in terms of a startup like us in the Pacific, the business environment is also quite challenging. It's also very difficult to start up a business like ours, to advocate for new business models and to implement new technology. When we talk about blockchain to people here, it's can be very very challenging for some people to understand what it is. And so the opportunities we see, the Pacific Islands, roughly around 60% of the world's tuna comes from the Pacific. That's a percentage that's normally quoted. We see that as an opportunity and an opportunity to gain greater value for the resource that's coming out of the Pacific. We're seeing also, ethical consumerism. People are starting to, question where their food comes from. We see that as an opportunity in terms of being able to brand products, to market these products. If our resource is diminishing, then we need to look at how we maximize and value add that, so that the communities and the countries in this ocean region can continue to benefit in the future. And an example of that is things like Fiji Water, which is a global brand. We're also seeing, growing sustainability efforts, increasing countries committing to marine protected areas. I think Fiji has also committed to 30% of its waters to be a marine protected area at some point in time. And so, having traceability or having technology, being able to monitor those particular areas and what's coming out of it will become increasingly important. I mentioned IUU earlier, so the regional authorities and national agencies all have an increased effort in terms of monitoring, control, and surveillance around the Pacific, and a lot of that is technology related as well. And we're starting to see also greater local awareness of these ocean challenges, and perhaps what we've tried to do with our work is to encourage other people to follow in our footsteps. So other Pacific Islanders to take up the challenge, to look at the challenges that are facing our oceans, our land, and to try to come up with innovative solutions for that. So we've tried to advocate that and show through our work that it's possible to create impact that way. Now, very quickly, some of the lessons and in terms of scaling up. For us, we're a very small company. There's probably 7 of us on our team. So for us, strategy is key. We're always need to be ahead of the game. We need to know what's happening in the sector. We need to know where things are developing so that we can align our services and our technology in that direction. So for us as a small company, that's a key thing. Now for startups in the Pacific, the startup ecosystem is very, very it's very new. There's almost no opportunity for financing or investment. So we've had to build a strong track record based on our work over the last 3 years just to gain traction. We also look at diversifying. So what we do in fisheries, we also do in agriculture, and in fact most of our work right now is largely in the agriculture sector. Since the pandemic, the agriculture sector in the Pacific has boomed, and we are finding a lot of opportunities there. We've also learned from our professional careers. Both my wife and I, we've leveraged our connections, our networks, to develop and to grow Traceable. And we're also quite realistic about what we can achieve, and we know that change takes time, impact takes time as well. So our view is a long-term view in terms of where we want to take the company, and where we would like to see the change happening. So we're realistic about that. In terms of scaling up, we will leverage our expertise in fisheries and technology. It's probably rare to find those skill sets in a particular startup here in the Pacific. So we leverage that as much as possible, and our approach is always to be realistic about what we can do, because we are here in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. There's not a lot of opportunities in terms of scaling up. There are limited opportunities, but we try to scale up as much as possible. We've also had opportunities at investment, but we've always been cautious about what that would mean for our company, and particularly the investment the investment framework here in Fiji is not very conducive to the type of investments that we've been attracting. So we haven't really taken up those opportunities. But yeah, with that, thank you very much. Happy to take any questions during the Q&A session, and appreciate the opportunity to speak about our work here in Fiji. Thanks, Didi.
Thanks a lot, Kenneth, and I think it's great also that you gave some practical advices. I would say, especially what you told at the end. I think it's very clear and showing that it's not easy, but on the other hand, that if you can persevere and continue with what you do, there are a lot of opportunities. So I expect for sure there will be lots of questions at the end about that, and. Not a lot of space again now for Q&A, but just one question that was highlighted already, which I think is good to answer very briefly, is how your solution can actually help with the fish stocks in the ocean.
Yeah, so in terms of traceability and fish stocks, in the Pacific in particular, capturing catch and effort data is actually quite well collected. But in regions where it isn't, traceability could then, provide a means to strengthen your catch and effort data. what we are finding is that, you know, a lot of our the companies we work with, they would like better real-time catch and effort data so that they could target their fishing, which would basically mean that they'd be more efficient and they could target more, you know, better stock, which could potentially mean that you know, it could reduce things like bycatch and other things. But you know, again, that's not proven here in Fiji in particular.
Thank you for explaining, and thank you, Peter Jacob, for raising the question. I think very valuable for everyone. Thank you again, Gannett. We'll get back to you in the Q&A session. And actually, now I would like to invite the next speaker. I would say this speaker is coming from another part of the ecosystem, which is actually very important as well. And that's actually the investor side. So we would really love to learn from you, Valencia Dia, how investors can play a role in the blue economy. You're of course the investment manager of Circular Capital, and we would love to learn more from you.
Thank you, Didi. Can I still share my slide? Thank you. Just to give a brief of introduction, Circular Capital is a Singapore-based investment management firm. Our first fund, we call it the Ocean Fund, is focusing on investing in any solutions to ocean plastic leakage into the ocean in South and Southeast Asia that we see to be replicable and scalable. Through my presentations today, allow me to share a bit more about why we are investing in the sector and how we are doing it. Next, please. Sure. I think as Didi probably have raised in the beginning, and Dr. Blake as well, that we are facing a global ocean plastic crisis. It's significant and it shall not be overlooked. Right now, there is 150 million tons of plastic in the oceans, and it grows by 8 million tons per year. Not only that it costs us environmentally, but it also costs us economically. We're talking about $13 billion in damage to marine ecosystems every year. And also, like I think Dr. Blake mentioned earlier, that a lot of the time plastic is used for single use. Meanwhile, actually, plastic can be used several times and can be recycled several times, and hence we lost 95% plastic packaging value, and that's about 80 to 120 billion US dollar that we lost because of the first use cycle. So we see this as a huge issue that we need to address, and most of this issue comes from Asia. On the good news, so we learned that actually we can cut down by almost half of this ocean plastic leakage by investing in the waste management and plastic recycling infrastructure in Asia countries, including in Indonesia. Now it comes with a challenge. So it is estimated that $5 billion US is needed every year to invest in this sector across the region. So where would that billions of dollar money come from, right? Yes, the government should take part. Yes, public sector might have to take part, and philanthropic might play a role in here. But we also see the need of private investors to also come in. Next. So when we talk about private investors, in the ideal world, we would like to invite those large institutional investors who can chip in billions of US dollars to come into the sector, because with their money, the impact that would be created would be way more significant than smaller stage investors. But this comes with a challenge as well. A lot of these large institutional investors are still unable to deploy the money into the sector because one, majority of the pipelines is still in the early stage, and also there is a lack of visible one that we are aware of at the moment. Second is because there's a lack of track record proving that investing in the sector is financially attractive for them to come in. So we see a disconnect here between the capital needs and the current funding available. And we believe that a catalytic capital at this very moment is very much needed to actually unlock and accelerate the deployment of the billions of dollars that we actually really need. And that's why we come in. Next slide, please. So this is why we set up this Circular Capital, the Ocean Fund, last year. which focus, as I mentioned earlier, to invest in solutions that address plastic leakage into the oceans. We are thankful that we got $106 million from these global corporations here that you see in the slides. And we're also thankful that we got support from the US International Development Finance Corporation that provide us with guarantee facility for some of the loans that we are making across the region, which further de-risk our investment. What excites us as well is that the fact that these corporations are not just passive investors. In the past 1 year, when we are dealing with them, they have been very proactively helping us, identifying pipelines, supporting the pipelines, giving knowledge sharing. So this is something that's exciting, and we're happy to move forward and continue our work with them. Next, please. This is just an overview of the Ocean Fund that I mentioned earlier. So with our $106 million fund, we try to invest in the range of $2 million and above in the form of equity or shares, loaned. We can also do quasi-equity depending on the needs of the company, and also depending on the country where they operate in and what would be suitable for that particular country. Our primary country focus would be India and Indonesia, where a lot of the pollution comes from. But also we're looking into other secondary countries, including Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, and other South and Southeast Asia countries. Next, please. Next. Yeah. So to date, we have invested in 3 companies. 3DOS is our first investment in Indonesia and Southeast Asia, actually. It's a woman-led plastic recycling company focusing on PET. They turn it into flakes that will be used for packaging and also textiles. Our first investment in India is Lucro. It's also a plastic recycling company, but they focus on harder to recycle plastic types, which is a flexible packaging. And the last one, actually, we just recently announced it a few days ago, I think, is India-based waste management company that committed to zero waste to landfill principles. Just to give more information, we will share some more investment that we close in the upcoming months. So stay tuned to that because we are excited about it as well. Next. Lastly, we believe that there is no silver bullet to solve the ocean plastic issue. Us as an investor or catalytic capital, we are just one part of the solutions. We believe that we need other stakeholders as well to play part in order for us to effectively address the ocean plastic crisis. We believe that waste collection and recycling infrastructure should be strengthened, packaging should be redesigned, policy should be revised, and also consumer behaviors, we need to change as well. So by aligning our efforts, I believe that we can build a resilient and also an inclusive circular value chain across the regions. Thank you very much, and I look forward for our discussion.
Thank you so much, Valencia, for explaining about circular capital, and great to see, of course, the investments that you have been making thus far. One question I'm already curious about, of course, you have experience in working together with investors and managing the portfolio for them. I'm really curious, what do you see as the main opportunities of attracting more funders, or maybe challenges in that as well? Like, how could we increase the investor ecosystem for this?
I think we split into 2, right? There is opportunities that so for the opportunities one, there are a few factors that makes us feel excited to be in the field. First is the fact that the government shows more interest nowadays and also shows more concrete actions to be part of the solutions to this crisis. I think in the case of Indonesia, they team up with the global GPAP to actually solve plastic crisis. That's from one part, and then from the second part, we see as well from the packaging producers and also like the global consumer products producers who shows more interest in using recycled plastic. So I think just a brief of story, when COVID hit and the oil price plunged, it affects the virgin plastic price, it drops. So it makes recycled plastic less competitive, and we were kind of worried that the demand for the recycled plastic would be decreasing. But then we had discussions with our investors, which you see on the slide earlier, and they show commitment to keep using the recycled plastic despite this conditions, and to know that there is a strong demand there regardless of the situation. It shows a strong signal that the future of recycled plastic growth is there. So that's the second part. The third part is like on the entrepreneur side as well. I've been in the entrepreneurship ecosystem for almost 4 years. Now, when I first in the ecosystem in Indonesia, I haven't seen a lot of players doing things on waste, on innovative materials to replace plastic packagings, or to address to do recycling as well. So nowadays I see more and more coming, although it's still in nascent stage. But then I'm glad that there are more and more entrepreneurs trying to address the issue. So and the last slide is on the last side, I think on the consumer side we see more changes in the behaviors. They start to do more reuse, they start to do more recycle. So it's something that excites us as well to move forward. As for the challenges, I think just one point for this, just to keep it short, for us, a lot of the companies, especially in the Southeast Asia countries, are more in the nascent stage. So it requires, so a lot of them have never been interact with venture capital before. They don't have a proper business plan. They don't have proper financial model. Hence, since pre-investment, we need to do a lot of hand-holding. That is something rare that other commercial VC do. But then we have to step in and do it since a very early stage before we even invest in them, because that's the situation that's currently happening. And while it kind of like affects the time that we need to close a deal, because like the amount of helping, assisting, and preparing the deal to be ready is also quite cumbersome. But we see that as a challenge that we are excited to address. So that's fine.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I can imagine that, like you say, if some technologies are newer, the risk profile is maybe a bit higher. So maybe as a final question from my side is like, any recommendations you have for other funders and how they can deal with that? Like stepping in maybe a bit more early stage than they're used to?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge. Like the way, I think the waste management and plastic recycling is something that a lot of the investors are not familiar with. And therefore the risk perception is like, oh, this is something that we're not familiar with. And it's like, there is high risk in there. We'd hope to see more investors would like to come in as a catalytic capital and to actually take more risk than the others. And here, I think the public funds can also support, our philanthropy can also support by providing like guarantee facility, for example, to de-risk the investment for this catalytic capital, or like, to help in setting up a blended finance mechanism so that at least if they want to come in early and the risk is higher, there is some mechanism that help to de-risk their investment.
Thank you so much for sharing, how you are dealing with it. Looking forward to the Q&A with you as well. And now I'm delighted to announce our next speaker, who's also playing an important role in the ecosystem. I think especially in facilitating as well the innovations that are there, because I would really like to invite Simone Smit, who is the head of exploration from UNDP Africa Accelerator Lab. Thank you.
Thank you, Didi. Can you see my screen? Great.
Yes, we can.
So, thank you. Thanks, Didi. So, good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone, and thank you so much to the AIS Forum for the opportunity to present here today. As Didi mentioned, I work for the UNDP in a project called the Accelerator Labs, which I'll tell you more about. Just briefly, as the development agency of the United Nations, UNDP is the convener of the Sustainable Development Goals, and we assist countries in achieving these. I'm sure, as you all know, the SDGs are a universal call to action to end poverty, protect our planet, and ensure that all people live in peace and prosperity. I wanted to show this next slide, which is a model developed by Prof. Johan Rockstrom at the Stockholm Resilience Center. One of the questions I was asked when developing this presentation was, why is the blue economy more important than ever right now? And this model really brings that home for me. We see that the achievement of any of the SDGs is dependent on a healthy biosphere, including life underwater, SDG 14. And as the foundation of all development, it really shows the enormous opportunity for blue economy interventions to have a ripple effect across all of the SDGs. We only have 10 years left to achieve the SDGs, so we are now in a decade of action, and that is why the blue economy is more important than ever. So a bit about our Accelerator Lab project. This is a new offering from UNDP. And our core mandate is really to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs through using unusual approaches that can potentially change the way that UNDP delivers development. At the core of what we do is that we identify, understand, and scale local innovations. There are a few premises that this project is based on. The first being that we need to surface grassroots solutions, because the people who are facing development challenges are the ones who are best suited to coming up with the solutions to them. Second premise is that we need to diversify the way that we understand development challenges. So including unusual voices and data sets, and really deeply acknowledging that minds on the margin are not marginal minds. And the third premise is that we need to experiment in short cycles, because we need to fail quickly in order to learn quickly about what works and what doesn't work. This image is our cycle. It doesn't often work out as neatly as this in practice, but that's what it looks like. So just quickly, these are the SDGs that the labs are working on globally, with the top 3 being sustainable cities, decent work, and responsible consumption and production. This is where our labs are. We have 16 existing labs that have been set up for around a year or so, and we have another 30 labs that will be coming online before the end of the year. As an example of the labs that are working in the blue economy space, in Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, we have a blue lab, and they run multiple calls and tax and so on. They're also supporting innovators, for example, the Blue Bot, which is an underwater drone to map reef systems. And then you can see in Barbados and also Mexico, Namibia, and South Africa, we are starting to look at seaweed, which I'm going to touch on later. In South Africa specifically, we're really at the beginning of our explorations into the blue economy sector. We have, though, recently run a call for innovations related to water security. And as an example, one of the innovators we're supporting there is using zooplankton to treat wastewater from aquaculture plants to make them more environmentally sustainable. We then have a number of labs that are working on reducing plastic and other waste that would otherwise land up in the ocean. There's examples are Angola, Somalia, Cape Verde, Timor-Leste, Philippines, and then related to Dr. Blake's presentation in Cambodia, they are also exploring using grass to make straws as opposed to plastics. Then, as Ahmed mentioned earlier, we see that this industry has the potential to double in the next few years. We're seeing increasing work in the space of policy, institutions, and frameworks. We're seeing increasing investment and financing mechanisms, and also innovative finance mechanisms such as blue bonds, which Seychelles is using, and which the UN Global Compact is also exploring, and then increasing research and innovation. So this crazy collage is just a few examples of some of the frameworks and institutions and research that is out there. And considering my Africa focus, I'd just like to make special note that the African Union has recently developed a blue economy strategy for the continent that was launched earlier in the year and is currently being socialized, but maybe an interesting document for anyone to have a look at who's interested in the African context. So to touch on a few of the challenges, which for me also represent opportunities, these are really at quite a macro level, and I think the previous panelists have touched on these, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just to say some of the core areas where we need to see some improvement are, for example, in sustainability, where we need to ensure that the protection and restoration of nature are absolutely at the core of any blue economy intervention. We need to put in governance frameworks to ensure a coordinated development of the sector, as well as to ensure that the legislation is in place that restricts extractive activities. Inclusivity, panelists have also mentioned this. We see in the research that's coming out that a lot of communities are not included in the decision making, and we need to include those local stakeholders. That needs to change. Innovation, I probably should have put this one first. We need to support innovators in this sector and develop pathways for scale at the national level as well as regionally and internationally. And finally, investment, we need to ensure that we are collaborating with the private sector and looking at cross-sectoral opportunities for funding. I recently attended a webinar with the African Union, and one of the speakers from UNECA identified some specific opportunities for Africa, and those included biotechnology, renewable energy, leveraging carbon markets, and nature-based solutions. In South Africa, we also are seeing an increased attention on biomimicry, which would be very interesting moving forward. So as we're talking about challenges, it would be remiss not to quickly touch on the impact of the pandemic. I know this writing is very small, but I'm assuming that we're sharing our presentations after this. So on the left, we have a graphic from UNDP, which shows some of the negative impacts the pandemic has had on the achievement of the SDGs. But then on the right-hand side, this is from UNECA's Africa Blue Economy Handbook. We can see how many positives there could be, how much impact the blue economy could have across all of the SDGs. So for me, the blue economy is an extremely important strategy as we build back better after this virus. Now I'm going to zoom in on a very specific opportunity and something that I'm very excited about, which is seaweed. So this is the Seaweed Manifesto, which has recently been developed by the United Nations Global Compact and Lloyd's Registered Foundation. And what they have done is they've put together a convening vision, which brings together stakeholders under a common coalition and frameworks. We will be collaborating on this project moving forward. I've included the website there, so I encourage everyone to go and have a look at this manifesto and sign up if you'd like to. And then I would like to use seaweed as an example of what I spoke about earlier around the ripple effect that blue economy interventions can have. So I think, with the complexity of the development challenges that we're facing mean that the interventions we use in themselves also need to be complex, interconnected, and transdisciplinary. We can see from the slide how inherent in seaweed and also in blue economy interventions is the ability for them to be applied across disciplines and sectors, and so creating a portfolio of solutions that address systems change at multiple leverage points. So we can see here, seaweed is a sustainable food source for humans as well as for livestock feed. We can create biofuels out of seaweed. Fertilizers that are being developed are returning nutrients to the soil. And all this time, the seaweeds are sequestering carbon, deacidifying the ocean, and absorbing pollutants from ocean water. And this is really what I mean around kind of co-benefits and ripple effects and multiple levels of impact on the SDGs. There's also multiple markets for seaweed, including vitamins, pharmaceuticals, coagulants, and so on. So that, that can create value across multiple markets. Specific examples from our accelerator labs is in Mexico. They're using sargassum seaweed to develop bricks for low-cost housing. And in Barbados, one of our innovators is using seaweed to develop biodegradable packaging. So those are just some specific examples. So I'll end on this seaweed. And like to say thank you so much for having me. Please feel free to reach out to me by email. The UN Global Compact, it will be setting up an African technical working group on seaweed. So if you're interested in that, please do get in touch. And I'd also like to encourage innovators and entrepreneurs on this call to get in touch with the accelerator labs in your countries if you have a solution or even know of a solution that can accelerate the achievement of the SDGs. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Simone, for sharing sharing more about your work, actually. And actually, you touched upon it at the end, but I still was very curious how you indeed are getting in touch with all those startups. Like, how can you fill your pipeline and find the right innovators? Can you explain that a bit?
Sure. So we kind of use a number of strategies. The first is we actually call it solution safaris, where as the accelerator labs, we go out into the field to surface grassroots solutions. This is really to provide access to innovators who would normally not have access to an innovation ecosystem. And particularly in countries like South Africa, where we have very high levels of inequality, we want to ensure that we are actively creating that access. We then also run calls and open applications for proposals and so on. So that also draws some of the innovators in. And then we do a lot of work to develop our own networks in the innovation ecosystem. So we work with a lot of hubs and accelerators and incubators and so on. And that provides another sort of sourcing network for where we can reach the innovators. And then finally, across the accelerator labs, we work in a highly integrated way. So we are in constant communication across our labs, and we share solutions. So for example, if a seaweed solution is discovered in Namibia, where they have an innovator who is grinding seaweed to feed to sheep and other livestock in a drought, then we will contextualize and localize that solution in South Africa to see if it can work here. So that's a few of the strategies that we use.
Thank you so much for explaining. That is good to know. And I also like what you said, like that if there are any innovators that I should for sure reach out to you. I think for now, it is actually time to open our Q&A. And I'm really happy as we've seen quite a lot of participants today. I think we almost reached the 200. So now I would say like, hey, let's make it interactive and make sure we get the most out of this session and being together with all these change makers today. I think one question has been raised a lot. So I would actually like to pose it towards all of you, and whoever wants can start answering it. And that's actually the one about local communities. You raised it as well, Simone, and I think there have been some questions in the Q&A box. How to involve these local communities? Does one of you want to answer? Do you want to say something about it, Kenneth, maybe, or Dr. Martin?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that, Didi, if that's okay. So in terms of the work that we do, while it's largely oceanic fisheries, we are starting more to work with coastal fisheries and communities around the coasts of the island states. Not just looking at traceability efforts, but also looking at how we can connect them to markets and things like that. And we also, through traceability, we're also looking at how we can incentivize, basically incentivize their good behaviors. So, if they're doing good practices in terms of fishing, or if it's agriculture, good farming practices, then we try and incentivize that through, trying to attain a premium for the products that they get. This is still very new. This is, it's tried in other parts of the world, with cocoa and whatnot. But we're trying to do this with, with fish and with other, agriculture commodities. But it's still early days for us again.
Thank you. You want to add to that, Dr. Martin?
Yes. I think that basically the secret here is it needs to be systemic, and holistic view. You can't go into a community and say, I'm going to solve this particular problem without realizing it's going to have impacts in other dimensions. So it's important to look at the communities, look at their culture, look at their heritage, look at the issues that are facing them, look at the regulatory frameworks, look at the financing, look at all the various issues, and then make sure that what you're doing actually fits in and adds value, and that there are no perverse outcomes. Because very often the most well-intentioned interventions create perverse outcomes that are actually you then have to deal with downstream. So a well thought out, systemic, holistic outcome is what you're seeking.
Thank you. And I think a question related to that is actually how is there a way in which we can also improve the livelihood of informal workers with these solutions? As poverty, of course, is often a big issue in the areas which we're talking about. Simone, do you want to say something about it? Have you seen that with the innovations that are part of your programs?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Didi. And yes, as I said, the Accelerator Labs really focus on grassroots solutions. So those that have been innovations that have been developed by local communities themselves. I think on this topic, I think inclusivity needs to be included as a core value in whatever we do. And so we need to actively ensure that inclusivity is a value that is part of our project design from the absolute beginning. And there's so many wonderful co-creative participatory approaches that we can use practically to include communities. And yes, I really liked what we said about the surfacing social cultural stories and ensuring that it's not a top-down process when we go into these communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Perhaps can I add a little something there? Blue Planet actually operates a large number of sites in India. So we have some significant experience in taking people from the Dalit, the lower echelons of the social strata in India, and providing them with social, financial, and medical inclusion. But it has to be noted, it's not straightforward because there is a long-standing informal infrastructure which you disrupt, and it's not so straightforward as people think. So like I said, it's complex and it needs to be carefully diagnosed before you intervene. Otherwise you get perverse outcomes.
I think
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to share a bit. I think before we talk about improving the livelihood during this COVID time, I'd like to share more about like how we can ensure that they can actually sustain themselves before we improve them, just to make sure that they sustain. The waste management sector in some countries like Indonesia is it has been very helped by the presence of the informal sector so far. The waste collections is not effective at the moment, and informal sector plays a big role in that. And during the COVID time, we see that it's same as other businesses, that a lot of the recyclers that work in the sector is also impacted because there's a delay payment from the buyers because of lockdown. Buyers do not buy their recycled materials anymore and things like that, and so it affects the sustainability of the business of the recyclers. And ultimately, if the recyclers shut down their business or stop operating, it also affects the livelihood of the informal sectors at that point, because they cannot sell their materials, they cannot get income from that point during this time. And we were kind of grateful that we met these recyclers and we invest in them in this kind of time. We try to help them future-proof. We support them with some additional capital needed so that they can sustain their operations. They can keep buying from the informal sector, so that at the end of the day, the informal sector also can still get income during this difficult time. So at least that's what we are doing at the moment. While in the future, we're also looking into several ways, because a lot of them do not have national ID card, which limits them to get an access to like public health and things like that. So we're looking into a way how can we partner with non-profit sector or others to help them getting the ID card. So that's like another thing that we're looking into at the moment.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it actually brings me to another question that I like to answer you, Valencia, as first. But how can what's actually the strategy to balance ocean conservation and the economy?
Yeah, I think to put in simply, the beauty of circulate capital is that we are not just very aggressively commercially driven, but we are also looking into the environment part of the business. So we have our own tailor-made metrics on the social aspect, on the environment aspects, to ensure that the company is in compliance to that, and to ensure that all the positive externalities that they are causing is not resulting in negative externalities. Like, for example, they need to have a proper wastewater treatment, for example, so that the waste that they're producing from recycling is not going to the river and things like that. So I think the way to balance it is through our strict impact metrics that we're having, so that the companies are not going to creating negative externalities.
Thank you. That's clear. And I see a question on the Q&A board of Hayruddin. Sarita, I'm not sure. Can we give the floor to ask this question live to the panelists?
Let's try it then. Is there anyone who wants to ask a question in a live session? Please You can.
Otherwise, I can take the question, of course.
Yes, if there's no one who wants to ask any question, then I think we can go ahead.
Yeah, we can go ahead. No, because I saw one question that actually relates to, I would say, this balance between conservation and economy, and that was about how you can actually have aquaculture as a positive development for local communities. So I don't know, Kenneth, if that's something you can say something about out of your experience.
Oh, sorry, Didi. Yeah, so aquaculture is not very big in the Pacific. It's a growing sector, and Fiji in particular has I'm comparing this to countries like Indonesia, where aquaculture is huge. Fiji in particular has priorities to increase aquaculture production, largely addressing food security challenges, and also to assist the local communities. But we're still again at really early stages in this. There's investment coming in, there's interest from outside players to come into the sector in the Pacific, but still some way off. We have had some aquaculture successes in terms of pearls and products from pearls for pearl development out of Fiji, but again not that many successes here.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Hey, in the meantime, we got a question for you, Simone. Tria Unita from University of Muhammadiyah Malang is asking actually you about the marine debris issue on the Pacific Ocean, and especially asking what kind of regulations are important for bringing back the marine ecosystem, and who's responsible for that, and maybe also the role that UNDP can play in it.
Oh, big question. So we have the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. I guess that would be the overriding one. And then obviously SDG 14 also includes a number of targets and indicators, some of which are related to marine plastic. I don't quite know how to answer who is responsible for that. I think that every country is responsible for their waters, for the waste that they're producing, and so on. But this is definitely an issue that we're looking at. As I mentioned, we have at least 7 or 8 labs across the UNDP network that are looking at waste not getting into the ocean, so reducing plastic waste on land before it can get into the ocean. And I have seen some incredible innovations around floating buoys that can collect marine debris. And I think there's some really fascinating research that's going into this at the moment, where they're using submarines to go to the bottom of the oceans to look at the level of microplastics and so on. So hoping soon to have some really good innovations here. And if Didi, if I can comment on the previous question on aquaculture as well, while I'm unmuted. So I think, one of the key critiques of the green economy was that often it could have been greenwashing, and that the economic and social side of the pyramid of economy, society, and environment was privileged over the environmental protection side. And I think this is a really important lesson to learn as we move forward in developing the blue economy, that we really need to ensure that the blue economy decouples economic growth from environmental degradation. So that's at the macro level. Talking about aquaculture, I think there's incredible opportunity for aquaculture at a very small scale. So really kind of speaking to subsistence and food security in communities, in local communities. We also see a lot of women working in the sector. So really great interventions for gender equality. And at the moment, specifically in South Africa, our government has implemented something called Operation Phikisa. Phikisa means hurry up development, where they'll be making large investments into aquaculture over the next couple of years. And as our role in UNDP, what we want to do is try and be involved in those projects and advise government to ensure that the investments in aquaculture will also be environmentally protective and restorative. So we will start developing evidence, for example, on regenerative ocean agriculture or ocean farming as one option instead of just straight terrestrial fish farms. Thank you.
Interesting. It's good to know. So So maybe also if people want to learn more about it, if it's okay, they can maybe reach out to you if they want to understand even better what opportunities are there in the market. And I now also received that there is a question of Michela Irawan. Can we give you the floor to ask the question?
Hi, yes. Thank you for your time and for all the panelists. So I'm managing my family business in Tuna in Indonesia, and looking at the bigger view of the blue economy, I think as an individual, as a corporate, we can always engage with the local communities and train them, but there's always a gap because I'm not a trainer, and there can't seem to be a faster bridge to cross, maybe like an accelerator program with UNDP to be set up here, or even like for organizations to actually come and guide the fishing companies to talk together, and then we can create a better like management in the sea. Because I think the no fish zone is really helpful, and that has to be facilitated from the top down approach. So I'm really interested, like we have about like 80 fishing companies here, and it's a huge export. So every single day there's a chance to really create impact in a whole tuna sector by coming here and facilitate with all the companies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I think, very important point that you're raising. So does any one of the panelists would like to respond to that? Simone or Kenneth, you want to respond based on your experience on what has been happening thus far? I think you mentioned, Kenneth, that it's still, of course, early stage what you're doing, but you also mentioned that at least transparency, for instance, can have play a big role there as well. How do you see the role of regulations there and enabling the community?
Yes, again, in terms of regulations, the Pacific is pretty, I would say, fairly well regulated in a sense. The regional agencies, the RFMOs, regional fisheries management organizations, are quite active, and countries are collaborating in terms of addressing these issues. So it's hard to see for me that there could be more regulation. But also, just going back to the question on the marine pollution and marine debris. So again, there are conservation management measures in place for any type of marine pollution that's coming out of the fishing industry, and countries, flag states, and fishing operators have to comply with those management measures to try and reduce that. And this is a developing measure as well.
Thank you. And maybe to continue, or Simone, do you want to add to that?
You saw me take a breath. Yes, sure. I missed a little bit of Michela's question, but I just wanted to say that what we really need is advocates and change agents like Michela, who will keep working hard to shift the system towards one that is more environmentally sustainable. So, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe something that Michela at least triggered for me, which I think I find very important is as well the collaboration between all the parties. I think already here in the panel, and most likely with the participant, we have quite some different stakeholders around the table. And I'm really curious, like, do you see any possibilities to collaborate a lot more or to fill certain gaps? Because I think one of the questions raised was about that there is actually maybe sometimes a gap that parties are doing what they can with their own capacity, but it does not always mean that you have the capacity to do everything, like training local communities, or if you're a startup. But the same goes maybe for if you're an investor. You can, of course, make sure you invest in the right things, but how do you know that the solution is making the impact it should make? So really curious, how do you see this collaboration between all the parties? Valentia, would you like to give give your first response on the collaboration in the ecosystem?
As in like, okay, how do we improve that? Is that the main questions on that?
Yes, yeah. How could we optimize that, and what are the opportunities there?
Yeah, I think through our work, we know that there is no single silver bullet to the issue. We learned that as well, and that's why we supported the development of the incubation network. This is a program that support working together with incubator, accelerator, entrepreneurial enablers to actually discuss together and help finding solutions to fight plastic pollution. So I think that could be an option as well, where like a program like the incubation network can be a place where different parties, investors, including startups and accelerators, can be in one part and have dialogue, as well as the government as well, to have dialogue on like how we can tackle the issues togetherly. So that's one part of the thing that we are doing at the moment.
Thank you. And I think, Dr. Martin Blake, you have a lot of experience with it as well, right? In bringing together the stakeholders?
Yes, indeed. It's, again, like I said, what we need to do is to make sure that we bring together all the stakeholders, do a very significant diagnostic, look at the issues in a holistic way, and then come up with interventions that don't create outcomes that we later have to deal with. So bringing the stakeholders together is very much what it says. You bring those stakeholders together and make sure they're all appropriately represented, included, and involved.
Yeah, and do you see any particular challenges there? Like, are there certain, yeah, because I can imagine some parties are easier to reach or to get in touch with than others.
It's not, to be honest, in experience, it's not so much the reaching people, it's actually that when you disrupt a system and you go in and you think that it's altruistic and it's good, that there will be those parties that are disrupted that don't think it's so good, whether it's, an informal group of, or an existing supply chain, which may be informal and unregulated, and they don't appreciate the intervention. I've found that in Vietnam, I found it in Sri Lanka, and in India. It's quite normal that you can go in to solve one problem and be confronted with a completely different set. So it's not an easy ride. But if you go in eyes wide open, it's not so bad.
Yeah. And then one follow-up question maybe on that. I think what we have talked about today already is that everyone sees the need for bottom-up solutions. So solutions that really are starting bottom-up. But still wondering then as well, top-down, are there sometimes then rules and regulations that can actually help? So which role can the government play in that sense? And at which moment in time?
So I think from my perspective, governments can help by creating level playing fields. They can help by themselves taking a view that things that weren't invented there or may not have been tried and tested in that particular location have a place. And what we see increasingly is the failure of projects because they actually haven't looked at what's happened somewhere similar or elsewhere. I could quote things like large thermal waste to energy treatment plants across Asia have been particularly disastrous, and most of them fail. Yet when we go in with holistic solutions that cover all the bases, including social inclusion, they say, oh no, we've decided to go with an incineration plant. And so it's difficult. And I think what we've got to do is get some sites up, even if they're demonstration sites, where people can seeing is believing. People can see it, they can see how it works, and then maybe see that that's a better alternative to large scale, heavily invested projects that actually don't stack up financially. Most of the projects fail on the finances, I found, rather than the technology. So, that's where the problems are.
Mm-hmm. Do you recognize that, Valencia?
Could be very depending on the companies, but that's true as well. I think in our case, in the past 1 year, a lot of them are actually very early stage for us to come in, like it's ideation or MVP. So like from the investor point of view, we cannot take that. While those that we have engaged more deeply or like mid-size or like early stage as well, sometimes the issue is on like beyond the financing need. They also do not have the right or like the proper technology expertise to really make that happen. And that's why with our setup, the fact that we have our investors who have been in the sector for a while, and they have their own engineering team that are solid in a way, it's very helpful, because there is a transfer knowledge there to make sure that if a company that we invest in or we engage in is trying to set up something new, like for example, a proper waste management facility with some machineries involved, or like recycling facility that is new, then they set it up properly and correctly. So technological challenge can also happen in several cases that we look into.
Thank you. The Q&A is nearing an end. So I have the question, if someone still has a question that they really would like to have asked, please put it in the Q&A box for now. I will ask one more question and then we have room for one more. So that's good to know. I have a question for you, Simone. It's related to some questions we had before, but I think we didn't answer it specifically. How can we actually learn from examples that exist and are very successful? So I think it was mentioned in the chat box about the no fishing zones, for instance, that have been implemented in some countries successfully and maybe in others not. But I can also imagine if you talk about some of the innovations that you mentioned, that they already have been implemented successfully at some places around the world. And how can we actually make sure that we don't miss out on these solutions elsewhere?
Thanks, Didi. Yeah, it's tricky because I think there is so much out there, so many incredible innovations that we can learn from. And I think on one side, it is about a mindset, always kind of looking for those innovations yourself and being quite active in research around this area. The Accelerator Labs, our sort of byline is the fastest learning network. And when I spoke earlier about how we work in a very integrated way, this is what we're trying to do, is share lessons as much as possible. And that's across the UNDP, across our network, and in any of the kind of development spaces that we're working in. So there really is a focus now on not only surfacing those lessons in a concise way, but definitely sharing them. And I think it also comes back to the previous question or comments around collaboration. And this also, as part of our approach, we really prioritize collaboration and prioritize cross-sectoral and cross-disciplinary partnerships. I think, when we're looking at the blue economy, which is a transdisciplinary sector in itself, the ecosystems within that can become quite fragmented. So being able to bring stakeholders together across disciplines and across sectors is really important, I think, for surfacing some of those key lessons. And ensuring, again, varying levels of stakeholders, so having policymakers and community together, going for that global approach. And I think one of the things that we're also working on in South Africa as far as innovations go is a platform where innovators can come together, a convening space, basically. And I think many countries would benefit from this, where we often see innovation ecosystems are fragmented, where we can bring everyone together in that sector in one space. So these kind of convening platforms are interesting to be developed. But otherwise, I guess it's just keeping your eyes open all the time. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, it is anyway, I would say from my perspective, very inspiring to know what's all out there, or at least a little bit more after today. So I hope that's for everyone. For a final question, I would actually like to take the question of Mario Cabral. if you want to ask it, otherwise I can bring it forward. Mario has put forward a question and as following: how can a certain private company or NGO convince the local people that the benefit of blue economy development will be benefiting them in line with the marine debris solution as an example? So how can you as a private company or NGO actually convince the local people? Dr. Martin, would you like to answer this one?
I think I would go back to what I said a little earlier. Seeing is believing. This way, I think that at the moment we're confronted with ideas that waste, if you use that term, a lot of authorities just want to see it disappear and go away, and they'll throw money at it if they have it, and out of sight is out of mind. And of course, some of those solutions are particularly expensive, not particularly efficient, and unless it's properly well thought out, they'll fail in one way or another if there isn't a market or a gate fee for the waste. So I think to show the multiple benefits that can be attained by a systemic intervention that's well planned is to go in with a small scale demonstration, show the local people, show the local authorities, show the investors what's possible, and then begin to scale up, either with multiple small scale sites, which is probably the best, or to scale up in actual size and volume.
Thank you. I actually would like to add to this question, even out of my own experience, because as I mentioned, we are building reuse solutions in Indonesia, and something I've seen there as well that that helps a lot is involving actually the local community in the development of the solution, because we often see there's not one solution to an issue, but multiple. And even in the development of that one, it really pays off to already do the development together. And that brings me actually to some closing remarks, which I'm going to invite the panelists for as well, for some final sentences on the whole topic. I think we touched quite a lot of topics today. I mean, we talked about multiple issues that we are facing nowadays, and we also talked about multiple solutions, opportunity, challenges, which are all there. And I think the positive takeaway that I at least have is that it's really great to see that there are so many stakeholders involved in this topic and are very passionate about it and really want to enable you, me, everyone else as an innovator who would like to make a change in this industry. So bottom-up solutions are actually also crucial to make this change. At the same time, I have noted as well that it's not easy yet. I think we all have parts of these solutions in our hands. I do see as well that we have this big challenge together to make sure we are aligned and that we actually come to find each other so we can make it happen. But at the same time, I think like our startups have shown as well, is if you persevere and you really believe in what you're doing, you can actually make that change. And for me, then that's also the key takeaway, that we can make the change together, and that it helps a lot to spread that message around. But I would like to, love to hear, of course, what are the key or the final remarks of the panelists. And if possible, I would like to ask you to make it as concrete as possible. Like, is there any advice that you would like to give to the participants, or any key takeaways that they should keep in mind if they want to have a positive impact in this blue economy? Dr. Martin Blake, can I invite you first as first speaker of today?
Certainly. I think the secrets of success are to learn from detailed research of an area, of what the problems are in all the various dimensions. Certainly when we go in, we look at the infrastructure, the geography, the topology, the climate, the socioeconomics, the legal, the political issues, and then look at interventions that have the highest potential for success. It takes more time, but shoehorning in a technology or a solution that is later not going to work so well only leads to problems further down the line, because you have to try and then recreate trust. And they say, oh, well, we tried something like that before and it didn't work. So for me, it's, you know, you only really get a first chance at getting something like these innovative solutions across the line in certain areas. And it's important that people act responsibly in how they sell and deploy innovations and technologies to people who really need them.
Thank you so much. I think that's a clear recommendation. Thank you for sharing that. And Kenneth Katagona, you already gave quite some recommendations in your presentation, but if you want to give a final recommendation, like what would be your message?
Thanks, Didi. And you know, I think that there, when we look at the blue economy, there are a lot of opportunities. And so it's, you know, for me and for what we're doing, you know, it's important that we try to create this awareness around these opportunities, so that our people who are invested in this can take note and can, you know, have the courage to pursue solutions in this space. I think it's about creating that, you know, that environment. We very much lean towards the whole idea about testing things, you know, rapidly and learning from our mistakes and doing it better the next time. I think that's, you know, that's an approach that we've that has worked for us in the Pacific, and one that, you know, we should encourage our young folks and innovators especially to, you know, to take.
Thank you. So what I have thus far is that we should definitely think it through well, but also start acting, to start going quickly. So that are, I think, already two really good recommendations. Valencia, what would you like to add from an investor's perspective?
Maybe it's more on a personal perspective than investor perspective. I think, as Sarita mentioned to me, that a lot of the audience are students. Then maybe they think that, oh, you know, it should be the work of government, should be the work of investors, should be the work of entrepreneurs. But then I believe that everyone should act now, because whatever its size, each step counts at this point. So like even changing your consumer behavior also makes a difference.
Thank you. So we're actually all change makers here. Being here is the good start already. And Simone Smith from UNDP, what are your final recommendations and tips for all the participants?
Thanks, Didi, and I love what the panelists have said so far. I agree with all of that. I think my takeaway is that is a bit more at a macro scale, that we really require a shift in a paradigm where we prioritize only economic growth over other areas of development. And I think the blue economy is a powerful strategy to address both poverty and inequality, while also protecting and restoring our natural environments. So my tips would be that in order to achieve this shift in paradigms and solutions, we need to develop solutions that address multiple leverage points within systems, as the example that I gave. So yes, that was my takeaway.
Thank you so much. I believe we have sufficient food of thought for the rest of the day. So hereby I would really like to thank, first of all, the panelists, but of course also all the participants today for being here, and Engine and AIS Forum for organizing. Great to see all this energy on the blue economy and blue innovation. And then I wish you a really good rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope we can see you again in the next chance. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
everyone.
Very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.